Every person has a story, but not everyone has a place to tell it. I've interviewed amazing people all over the planet. I want you to meet them.
My name is Linn Parish, and I'm the most interesting person you've never heard of because I actually listen to Frank's pod.
Well, Linn Parish, thanks for being here on the podcast.
Yeah, of course. Happy to be here.
I got to tell Ellen last week, Ellen Travolta, who will be on, or by the time this is out, will already been out there a little bit already. We put her out, some of her stuff out, that we won the Signal Award for one of the best interview talk shows in the country. So
right. Yeah.
You're the first guest, one of the first guests. And she and you are the first ones that have. Yeah, it's pretty surprising, but that maybe somebody's listening, even Linn.
Well, Ellen Travolta to Linn Parish. It seems like
what a jump.
You've kind of peaked, and now you're on the.
Is this we've jumped the shark?
Yeah.
No Happy Days.
I hope I'm not
unintended.
The Fonzie. Yeah.
She was on Happy Days.
Yeah. No, I didn't know that.
Yes, she was.
Yeah.
So the jump the shark, came from that show. The jump the shark reference. That's pretty great.
Yeah.
So you're a newsman.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, really, 20 years plus. I mean, you've been in this a long time. You've had an interesting cusp of, as the now editor of the Journal of Business,
Sure.
which I have a copy of. I literally pulled up and, had a copy, got my mail, and look what I got. And it's pretty, this thing, I always look at like print as this changing landscape.
Right.
And you and I talked about this when you took this over 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
You remember that conversation?
Sure,
You just asked me what I thought about stuff, which I always thought was appreciated. But back in the days when this was not color, it's color and it's heavy. What are you doing that the rest of the print world isn't anymore? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know.
This digital world.
Yeah, we're diversifying like everybody else. Trying to go where people are, but with the business journals in pretty much every community, it still revolves around the print product by and large. Now it's even more pronounced for us if you look at it from a revenue standpoint. The lion's share of our revenue is still the print product,
the old school paper.
Yeah, you can tell by the thickness of the paper is directly related to the ad density. That's what decides.
There's a lot of ads in there.
Yeah.
Really. But that means people are reading it.
Yeah. And so during my tenure as editor, I've really tried to focus on, being where people are in terms of adding, our webcast. We're doing more with events, more with email newsletters and that sort of thing. But it's still all rises and falls with the print product.
Yeah. And the webcast, sort of a podcast kind of thing, right?
Sure.
Elevating the conversation.
Yeah.
You have that almost every month anyway, every week that you put that out. Any advice for the podcast guy?
That's the reason I'm here. I'm trying to learn from you. Yeah.
Well, that's the one thing you think we know in the podcast world. Nobody knows anything.
Yeah.
There's no one way to do this. There's so many of them now. It's like, people, that was the part that was most surprising, is there's so many podcasts now to get kind of recognized as one of those is just separate. But I honestly, I said this in a post I made, it is so much about Zach, producer right over there, and Nick, my son, who pushed me towards this and did our theme music and does all the audio stuff on this, and but making it look good and watchable is a really, because I think that was the edge I thought. It's like, if I'm going to do this is the business I'm in. I'm not going to make this not look good, not have it be watchable. And it's surprising how many are not this, don't put this much into it,
Sure,
I guess.
sure.
But I think that's part of the separators. It's got to look good and sound good. And you hope that you can ask good questions and have people.
Yeah.
I knew I'd get interesting people, and I have. All of you that have been on this are just like, I don't know. It's just so I did this so I could catch up with you.
Sure.
Literally, like, well, if we're going to do this, I want to see people anyway and see what they're doing
Right.
and what's going on in their lives. And so it's kind of turned into that. But what have you gotten out of your webcast? How's that been? You've had some amazing people on there, really obviously around business for the most part. That's what you guys do.
Sure. It's been fascinating because the way we started elevating was we were looking at an event that was smaller in scale, maybe more of an exclusive networking type event where we'd have a speaker. So we were literally looking at like the Spokane Club library and that sort of thing to do something like that. Then COVID hit and we shifted all of our events online. And then we had all this equipment that we didn't have before.
Right.
And we thought, well, what if we took this concept that we had for an in-person event and changed it into
Let people see it.
yeah,
That
a
we're all
virtual
at
event.
home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it really resonated at first. And so we were on to something there for a couple of years. I think that concept has matured to the point where we're actually looking at going more of a traditional podcast format moving forward. But it's been great so far, and
So
yeah,
when you
we've
say
had the best people, and
you have
and
great people on there.
yeah.
The when you say traditional podcast, what do you mean? Because everybody has a different view of that. Like Ellen was on here and she's like, "It's going to be filmed." And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, it's going to be filmed." I mean, we try to tell people that, but I tell these guys because they were like, they're all under 30 anyway,
Sure.
under 40, and they're like, "Well, every podcast is filmed," and
Yeah.
I'm like, not for somebody over 40. We just listen to them. I didn't even know you could watch them. And they're like,
Yeah.
we watch them all on YouTube, and you got to film it. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. What do you mean by traditional podcast?
Well, so we'll look at all three formats, meaning audio, visual, and we'll do a print element with it too. And so, but the video is going to come later. We're going to get the audio down first, and then kind of take it from
Yeah.
there.
Well, and again, there's no one way to do it. And if people
Right.
are tuning in, how do you judge viewership on something like this? How are you getting? Are you tracking that? Do you know who's
so
following and all
it's
that?
small but loyal, and so for the most part, and what we found is after everything opened up again, the people who actually tuned in live, there were fewer of those folks, but there were people who would still sign up so that they could watch it later.
That's right.
Yeah. And
That's
there's
how we
no
consume
barrier
everything
to it,
anymore,
Right,
right?
yeah.
We all get it. When is it convenient for me to watch that
Sure.
replay of whatever it is? Yeah.
Sure. But it's interesting. I don't know I don't know how much you listened to podcasts before you started this.
Some, not as much as these guys who really know the medium, but a few. Like
Sure.
Conan O'Brien's one of my favorites.
yeah.
Smart List is fantastic, and I listen to some sports ones.
Right. Same here.
That I'll, but outside of that, not. I mean, a fair amount, enough to have gone. Okay, I could do this.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I listen anymore now. Maybe
Sure.
a couple.
Sure.
So you kind of find the ones you listen to, and you sort of. I find myself just sort of finding the ones I listen to and sort of staying there.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So I found myself just drawing from the ones that I'm the most attracted to.
me too.
And so most of the ones that I listen to are longer and kind of deep dives.
Yes.
So-
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Conan O'Brien thing, I totally ripped that. I mean, the inspiration for the open of this show is there, his opening, Conan needs a friend, that little, hi, I'm Harrison Ford and I'm, disturbed about being Conan O'Brien's friend or whatever. That's just I was like, what a great open.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
it's got to have that. I think we took from there. The Smartless theme song music is unbelievably good, so catchy and amazing. And so Nick, my son, actually created the music for this.
Sure.
Which has been great. It's like a really people are starting to, you sort of remember here when you hear it now. And the other thing that I've told this, but I don't know if I told you. So, really the thing that motivated me to do this was, it was a chance to catch up with people. COVID had separated people,
Sure.
It's a great way to kind of showcase what we do in some ways as a company a little bit. The brand out there doesn't hurt, right? All that stuff. But I wanted to learn how to promote. We promote a lot of brands in a lot of different ways digitally, and I didn't quite know what a podcast was, how to do it, and this was the only way to learn is to do it.
Sure.
So that it has been in some ways a training ground for our ad campaigns.
Right.
digital shorts, which are now becoming, I mean, I just say this a year and a half in, but they're an ever growing part of our business.
Sure.
TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, that whole world, Facebook Reels now. Very different than running a digital ad that we serve that targets you on any of those platforms.
Right.
So they're not ads, but they're content. And if you're consistent enough with the content, it does build an audience and you get subscribers and it's huge, right? So we tested that. We now have clients that we provide that service to. We have 4 or 5 now that we're running digital ad short campaigns for.
Sure.
And they've been really effective. But we learned how to do it here. It's like, I'm not going to just try this with a client and hope that, hey, we're going to pay, you need to pay us for this thing we don't know how to do.
Sure.
So we got it down to a point where we're like, wow, this is actually working. And it's helped build, I don't know what our followers here are, but they're, close to 4,000 followers on this podcast, and probably a little bit more since we've gotten this little bump from the Signal Award for a week or two that might jump it. But that was kind of the impetus for kind of one of the reasons to do this. And it's been the promos that and this also had an impact on the Housing and Help series that we produced with that Gavin Cooley was in.
Sure.
That's made a big impact on sort of the regional approach to how we do homelessness and our trip to Houston. And, I'm super proud of that. That series caused so much of the conversation to happen.
Right.
Caused, the mayor to go to Houston. There was no conversation about it at that level, that sort of level, I don't think. And we've had over 4 million views of that content. And so that in the podcast, we're sort of learn from each other a little bit, how to do that. And the reason that worked, we got more views from the promotion about, hey, you should watch this, than we did the actual, than people watching it.
Right.
But it had an impact on the leaders of the community in a way we didn't quite anticipate.
Right.
We sort of hoped would happen. But, them using it as sort of an instruction manual on how to do this, and that was our goal. Is like, we're not going to just make this thing that says we've got a scary problem, because that's been done.
Right.
But why did we get here? And is there some sort of way to manage this better?
Sure.
And I'm really become more of an expert on this than I ever intended to.
Right.
In fact, I got a call from the mayor's office in Jacksonville, Florida, who had seen Mandy Chapman Simple on this podcast and found her as an expert on homelessness through this podcast.
Sure.
Last week. And I'm like, whoa, did you know we did this web series about this? He goes, no. All he knew was this.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, that's so interesting to see how are people finding content where, because it does spread sort of virally. You get an Alan Giebel, who was on this podcast as a big, business exec for 30 years in Singapore. His perspective about things. Well, Alan's got his own network of people, right? That might see this in Singapore. And so you start seeing followers in places you just never thought you'd see them.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So that part's really cool. But I love the fact that we've stayed kind of the roots of, this is a Spokane thing. I mean, it is about people I know who a lot of them happen to have had some connection to here.
Right.
And I don't want to do this in a way that's so virtual that they don't show up in person. This is more fun for me than through a screen. I just think it loses a ton, and tons of podcasts do that, and it's fine. But you do that. You're sort of in person with most of these people, aren't you? Some of them virtually on your podcast?
Only one virtual. Yeah. We did Jim Frank virtual.
Okay.
When he was
worth doing
on vacation. Yeah, for sure.
I'm trying to get him on this too. He said he'd do it, but he's a busy guy.
Yeah, but he was fantastic.
Oh, he's amazing.
No, that's not true. We did one with Keonta Duncan virtual as well.
So what do you think? Better in person?
Love it in person.
Always, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So who are your heroes growing up on the news side? And what was the world like when you jumped into this? You know what I mean? There was no virtual. There was no, it's not that long ago in the history of the planet. Let's be honest.
Right.
Pretty quick. Oh, by the way, cheers. You didn't say no to this. You don't have to drink it, but you didn't say no, so I poured it anyway.
I'll take a little sip.
All right, okay, this is now the Amador taste test with Linn Parish. Right?
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. we've made a promo saying that Amador is a fake sponsor of this podcast. We like it so much.
Yeah.
So I every podcast I'm trying to get Amador to actually sponsor.
Well, maybe this will be the one that takes.
Maybe this is the one.
I'll try not to let it unravel. Yeah.
Yeah. So what was the news? What was the news world like, and what drew you to it? There's something romantic.
Yeah.
About it, or you know what I mean? That interested you. It had to be.
Yeah. There's two elements, and they both kind of dovetailed really well for me. One was, my first job was a paper route. Which it's kind of a shame that can't be a kid's first job.
It's a great job. It's a great first job. I didn't have one, but my brother made me go. Yeah. So it's like I just did a paper route and didn't get paid.
Yeah. No, well, that's the way it goes. That's the way I got looped into it. One of my buddies, he'd always invite us to sleep over on Saturday nights so that we could help him carry the heavy Sunday morning papers, right?
Oh, that's an entrepreneur.
He's no dummy, yeah.
And you fell for it, Tom Sawyer. Yeah.
And so, exactly. And so I would actually get up a little bit early to read the paper before I delivered it. And I loved the feeling of knowing what was going on before other people did.
All by yourself.
Right. Yeah.
It's a personal deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I started writing for our high school newspaper. I don't even know if that's a thing.
And this is where in Montana?
In Billings, Montana.
In Billings. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I grew up in Billings.
I just had a call with some people in Billings for a potential project. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Billings is a big boomtown now, man.
Yeah, it is.
It's really grown.
Yeah, it's crazy because I grew up on what was considered the West End at that time, and now it's pretty much the middle of town.
Oh, it's ginormous. I mean, it's really taken off. Yeah. Like everything up here, right? Really, the northwest part of the world everybody's grown.
Yeah. So if you drive through like the Shadle area or like that neighborhood by Joe Albee,
that's where I grew up.
Yeah, that's basically. It looks very similar to the neighborhood where I grew up.
Okay.
Those
Post-war houses.
Ranchers.
Yeah,
exactly.
Wow.
And so basically, started having a little bit of success writing for the high school newspaper. And I remember, this is going to sound ridiculous now.
And dreamed of writing for the Billings Gazette.
Yeah.
Is it the Gazette?
It is the Gazette. Yeah, good call.
Thank you.
Good call.
I'm very proud of it.
And so I remember once I was writing a preview story for a basketball game, Crosstown Rivals, right? And I was talking to one of the players for our team, and he told me that the best player for senior had blown out his knee, right? And I thought, man, I have a scoop.
Lynn's first scoop.
Yeah. And then the teacher explains to me, well, we can't report that without, verifying, and blew out his knee is not a technical term, and was a complete buzzkill about it. And so, but it was that feeling.
So you decided to be as yellow a journalist at that moment. Yellow journalism was the only way to go. Screw you. I'm going to report it.
I'm going to be reporting this poor kid's medical
history. His career.
Yeah. And so anyway, it was just those two things that kind of dovetailed well was some success with writing, and then that feeling that you get of actually reporting.
Right. That you're the first to know.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we were both running a little bit late, and you're like, "No problem. I've got a bit of a scoop or whatever. There's some breaking news." Yeah. And I'm like, "Ooh, breaking news," which it turns out not to be great news. We lost some jobs in this town, right?
That's right.
Yeah, from a plant closing. So not the kind of one you want, but still, do you get a little bit of a excitement of when that stuff happens? You're in the know.
Yeah. It's a little bit less. Up and down than it used to be, because I'm kind of used to it now. But it's still it still feels like we're doing something to contribute to the community, by informing them of what's going on around them. Right. Yeah.
So back to my other question.
Sure.
News hero.
Yeah, I don't know.
You were your own hero.
It was around that time of the, all the President's Men,
Oh, sure.
And that sort of thing. I mean, that was, years, probably 15 years before, but it was still
a huge topical thing.
Yeah.
But
that also, I don't know if that's what made it, but that also made it to where every newsroom had a rock star, And that's something we've tried to kind of get away from a little bit is the whole celebrity journalist thing.
Yeah.
And
The Woodward and Bernstein of the world.
right. And so, yeah, I went to the University of Montana
Okay.
and got a degree in journalism.
You
Great
got over to
school.
you got over to the west side of that state, and
Yeah, that's
everything
right.
changed. No, that's a great place.
Yeah,
We do a lot of work in Missoula, and the Grizz are great.
yeah, yeah.
It's everywhere. How long were you there, and what brought you to Spokane? How did you get here?
Yeah, so back then, kind of the career trajectory for most people in newspapers was similar to how it is with people in broadcast in TV. So
You work your way
you'd
up,
go from market to market,
right?
and there wasn't a lot of community journalist was almost a pejorative term at that time.
Yeah.
And so my first job was with the St. Mary's Gazette Record in St. Mary's, Idaho. So I've pretty much spent my entire career within a 70-mile radius of where I am right now, kind of bucking
Me
that
too.
trend. Yeah.
More like 5 miles.
Yeah. But, I had friends who would go, Butte, Yakima, Orange County, that
Sure.
kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But so I went from St. Mary's to Coeur d'Alene, and then I knew I wasn't going to follow that kind of path, and got on with the Journal of Business, and it turned out to be a really good fit.
So how is business news different than news? The experience, at least at where you're at now, having seen it both from a reporter and then all the way up through the career, to the editor position,
Sure.
and all of that. I would guess it's a little more stable, but maybe not. I just wonder what you've noticed the difference with that
Well,
is, because they're really different things.
Yeah, from a reporting standpoint, you're reporting on more. The questions are a little bit different. So to a degree, so you're talking about jobs. Basically, you're talking about anytime people spend money, the investment in the company, hiring people, firing people, buying buildings,
Buying buildings, yeah.
selling buildings,
Building
that sort of
stuff.
thing. Yeah,
Right.
And so, and your reader, if it's a business journal, they're going to have a level of knowledge that about business, of course, that your average reader is not going to care about
Right.
necessarily.
So you'd mentioned before the podcasts you like are
Yeah.
the ones you dive a little bit deeper into.
Sure.
You get to do that with your job.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
This is not just, the headlines that
Right.
Educating people at a sort of a high level. Do you like that? Is there a correlation there, you think?
I do like that. I like it a lot. But with if you think about the challenge of being a general circulation newspaper like The Spokesman, where you're trying to serve everybody, that's a tall task, and they do a good job of it.
Yeah, they do.
But
And the Inlander.
yeah, the Inlander's great.
Man,
Sure.
I mean, it's probably the most successful independent paper in the country, or one of them.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, it's got to be up there.
How are you guys? Do you ever gauge yourself against? We'll talk about kind of the elevation when you took over here and what you've done to change it, and it really does look like it just looks better and it feels better,
Sure,
and it's just
sure.
more readable and all that stuff. But do you compare yourselves? I mean, the Inlander, I know, Ted and Jer and Tamara, and we talked about just like, man, I mean, they are really per capita, at least anyway, one of the most read independents. Do you guys compare yourself at any scale with other journals of business, because they're all over the country, right?
It's more when you're talking about the Spokesman and the Inlander, it's more like looking to them for inspiration at times, because I'll see something that they do that I think works, and I'll see stories every once in a while where I'll go, boy, we really should have
jumped on that.
We should have done that. I wish I would have thought of that.
Right.
And
what about other journals of business around the country?
Sure. Yeah. So actually, we're part of an association of business publications.
Okay.
And it runs the gamut between like what we do to business magazines,
Mm-hmm.
statewide magazines, that sort of thing. And so what we do as a staff is I go to that convention every year, and I'll grab everybody's papers there,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
and
smart.
then every 2 weeks our staff will go through and look at what we like, what we don't like. There's things that we do now on a regular basis that are things we stole from other business publications throughout the
Oh, yeah,
country.
of
Yeah,
course. You were
yeah,
inspired.
yeah,
Let's be right. Come
absolutely.
on. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just a huge part of the creative process no matter what you do.
Yeah,
You got to you want to get better, and you get inspired by people that are.
yeah, and you don't want to get in a rut, and
Right.
that's my fear sometimes is I look at it and go, am I not thinking creatively enough? Yeah.
Well, because you called me, I don't know how long you've been the editor now.
It's been 6 years.
6 years. So
Yeah.
6 years ago, you were like, "Hey, man, I'm taking this thing over. Can I just talk to you and tell you what
Yeah,
what do you
sure.
think of this and what could we do?" And I just appreciated that you thought just to
Yeah,
do that.
that was a great
What?
conversation.
Well, good. I'm glad it helped. I mean, it seems like you did it.
Yeah.
What was the vision that you had then? What was the paper like then? What's it like now? And how did you do it?
Well, we
Because
just
I
wanted,
saw your vision and
yeah.
you've done it. How'd you do it?
Yeah, we just wanted to be a little bit more dynamic in our design. So if you think about when the journal was started, the Wall Street Journal would have stories in the same places every time, and it was the
Yes.
gold standard for good reason.
Oh yeah.
A
Right.
phenomenal publication,
Yeah.
and
Still.
so we modeled that, and so the front page would have four stories in the same spots each time, and so that worked really well for a number of years. But what you'd find is that there wasn't a lot of flexibility for art, and there wasn't flexibility for emphasis on a story where you could, with design, say this is important. You need to pay attention to this.
Right.
So
Like this headline,
yeah,
that's a big, you're making emphasis there.
yeah, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so, but it's also, it could be at the top of the page, even bigger than that. And so, our average reader is honestly at this point around my age, early 50s.
25. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You
And
sunk
so,
yourself, brother.
yeah, I
It
know,
wasn't me.
I know, I know. I should have bled the fifth. But and so, but we, the industry's always talking about attracting
Right.
younger readers, and so this isn't directly to that end, but it does work along with other pieces to that end of trying to be more engaging and more inviting to the readers who might not be familiar with us.
So do you do a lot of thinking about or research or get feedback from the under 50 crowd on what they want to look at? And how much longer will they read this?
I don't know.
You
I
know what
don't
I'm
know.
saying?
Yeah, yeah.
We
And
could ask
so,
Zach. He's right there. I mean, I'm surrounded by, under 35s.
yeah,
That's all I work with basically almost,
sure, sure. Well, how we all
thankfully.
consume news is different from how it was 10 years ago. I mean, how many
Oh my gosh.
print publications do any of us spend time with,
Well, I mean,
obviously?
I read this probably more online than I do. I don't know
Sure,
that. It's probably 50-50.
sure. Which is a win for us, by the way.
Is it?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
You want that. I mean,
Yeah,
you want to be able to have a digital space where you do well. Both
sure.
of them healthy is what you
Yeah,
want. Yeah, you want
absolutely.
50-50.
But and so what we've kind of found is that people read for information at times and for enjoyment at others, right? And
Hmm.
so if you're reading for information, you don't want a big, you don't need a grand presentation to know that, Purcell Systems is closing its plant here,
Right.
right? And
You want to know
you just know,
you want to know right
yeah,
away.
this is what's going on, this is when it's going down, and you're out.
And here's the impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but with the print publication, we're giving people information, news about the local business community, but we're also hopefully providing something that's a little bit more enjoyable to interact with.
So a lot of what we do as a digital kind of agency, really,
Sure.
we create stories and content, but we're always super mindful of the audience. Who are we sharing stories with and
Sure.
hoping they see, right? who are your audiences? And I always look at this like, oh, your audience is the business community,
Right.
or is it?
Yeah.
Is it the community and the business community? Because these are really, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
much what are the audiences that you kind of focus on, or is it just the business community? I mean, I don't know what you're.
I think it's evolving, Frank, because I
I do
think
too.
that there was a time in the past where we wouldn't have done a story about necessarily about politics, and we still don't, like, we don't endorse candidates or
Right,
anything
right,
like
right, right.
that, but we will
And the
venture.
and the spokesman does.
Yeah,
They'll endorse, and maybe even the
yeah,
interviews.
I don't think they do
Did they
anymore,
stop?
but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
but
in this climate, it's probably smart. No, I mean, yeah, it's sort of
right.
odd that they ever do.
Yeah. And I have a friend who hammers me
Newspaper.
about us not endorsing candidates. I just don't see.
They want you to.
Yeah, they think we
Why?
should, just as the voice of the business community
Oh,
endorsing.
yeah, but the business community is super diverse. You and I know
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I mean, the people that sponsor that are advertisers in yours or clients of mine, they run that gamut.
right.
I mean, the clients we have are all over the map, and
Sure.
I would never guess as to who they would endorse. Why would
Right.
you?
Yeah.
So you got on audience then. Is it more business and community, or does it depend on the story that you're after?
Yeah, and so the readers in print are different from the readers online. So the business to consumer type news will perform a lot better online than
In the print.
right. Well, not or just then more business to business type news will do, and it makes
Oh, I
sense.
see.
It makes sense if you're googling, Houston hot wings, and our story pops up first. That's what we want to
Right.
happen.
Right. 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 Right.
But I do
Right.
remember the first time I ever started messing around with Google Analytics and looked to see what our and this was early 2010s, right?
It's still amazing stuff.
Yeah.
We live on it.
Yeah. But I still remember looking, well, what was our most read story last year? And it was a new Golden Corral in Coeur d'Alene. And I'm like, man, we do like these
Really.
huge, long, in-depth, thoughtful pieces. And the
Award-winning stuff.
yeah, literally.
Yes.
And the top story was a Golden Corral in Coeur d'Alene. And it's simple. It's because someone Google's Golden Corral, Coeur d'Alene, and we're the first thing that pops up.
Right. Our new
Which
new
is
business opening in Coeur
yeah.
d'Alene. It shows up, and people are like, "Hey, there's a new Golden Corral here."
And by the way, I can look down my nose at it, but that is the beginning of the sales funnel, right? Someone learns about us through something like that. They go and look at something else, and hopefully they become fans at some point.
Right. And they
subscribers.
subscribe. Right.
Yeah,
And in this podcast format, you're really after subscribers. Like
sure.
that's
Yeah, absolutely.
where I'm at. It's like I love people to share this and like it and all that stuff, and it always helps. But if you subscribe to this, that's really what I want. That's
Sure.
really what we all want. You
Yeah.
want subscribers, that people that are regularly kind of check in and follow, and that every time you release a new thing, that they can see it or not.
Yeah.
But that they're in the funnel, right? You
Yeah.
basically get paid to get subscribers. I
Yeah,
mean, that's
absolutely.
kind of how it goes. So the other big piece of the cool part of your job, and I don't want to. I guess maybe that is the next question. What do you love the most about what you get to do now?
Well, there's two pieces really. One is, as an editor, that relationship with the writers and getting to work with writers who are typically younger, not always, but typically, but getting to that relationship that you can build of trust, and
Mentorship.
development, yeah,
Yep.
yeah, and helping them come along further in their careers is a really great piece. But I also like the outreach piece, being able to do things like this and tell people about the journal and put a face with the name, so to speak.
On the mentorship piece, who are your writers now when you talk about age? And that's really changed too, right? Because this was a career. It was a much different career, although maybe it was always that Spokane's always been this market you can grow up at, and then you go across. I remember a couple guys when I was a kid growing up, and there's this guy named James Satori. You
Okay.
remember James
No,
Satori?
huh?
He was
Huh.
phenomenal. He was a creme guy. He was just a reporter and anchor guy, mostly reporter, and he did stuff on. I remember a few years later, it's like, oh my god, he's on the CBS Evening News. Like
Yeah.
this guy is
Yeah.
really big. He's probably still doing that, and I just thought, whoa, that's what Spokane is. It's sort of been that, at least on the news side. Is that I don't know. That's always been the case in the print side,
To
maybe
a
less. I
degree,
mean, you got your John Blanchetts, that have been around and they
sure.
hung around forever and sort of built a relationship as a writer with that. Sean Vestal's kind of doing that.
Right.
You
Right.
guys have your guys. So, or is it more of a who are your writers now? Is that changed the demographics of who they are?
Yeah. So journalism school graduates are, especially with the print emphasis, are rare these days, to be honest. And so at some point years ago, we had to kind of broaden our minds about what might make a good reporter candidate. And so it starts with writing, and that's what we find a lot is people who love to write and are looking to parlay it into a job of some sort, right? And so we can help them explore that. But looking for someone who had newspaper experience, usually if they do, it was a university newspaper, and so we have to kind of take it from there. But we've hired people who have, in a couple of cases, haven't had direct experience and had good success.
On the journalism
Yeah,
side,
because
because they can write.
well, they could write, and they had curiosity, which is such an important part of this job. Is curiosity, which critical thinking goes along with that. I always say critical, not cynical
Right.
thinking. And so if you have curiosity and a desire to write, that's a good place for us to start.
Yeah, I find myself in a very similar role because the team that I have here, so many of them are say early stages. I mean, they're 5 to 10 years of stuff here,
Sure.
but that's basically what I do all the time. Is we kind of always collaborate together on making whatever it is we're creating better, and I get to kind of share how I'd see that, what they could change. And sometimes I'm not right and they're right, or they blow me away, but just how they've done stuff, So
Sure.
there's a real balance between I want you to make these changes so that everything we do looks the same. We
Right.
try really hard not to, so that we look like the brand that we're helping, not like us made it. And there's
Sure.
a style of that thing that people know or they don't. But so much of it now is like when somebody gets to a level of expertise, as a storyteller, particularly where they can then put their own feel and stamp on that and still
Sure.
tell an effective thing.
Right.
And nothing gives me more joy than to go, oh wow, that is so his
Yeah.
way of telling that. I never would have thought of it that way, but it's great. And yet, so my number one rule for around here and the input that I give on content that we put out, stories that we
Sure.
put out, the only real rule is if I'm distracted and taken out of the moment of the experience of viewing this, then you got to fix that if you can. You know
Sure.
what I mean? Like, it, you shouldn't know that it was made by somebody.
Hmm.
You shouldn't experience that. You should just experience this thing, and you don't really care. There should no, the one you're just so immersed with the story that's going on that's the most important thing. And so most of the time I'm just like, oh, that's a distraction. Let's fix it. The
Yeah.
sound is bad, or the edit was bad, or we have a better shot there that would convey that and keep my attention. That kind of stuff is really it. Do you find yourself in a similar spot? Like, there is writing and it is really changed on the
Sure.
grammar side. I see, people sending me stuff here and we write a lot of stuff. It's different writing than what you guys are doing. But the level of how that's communicated has changed,
Sure.
and the rules have changed.
Yeah. And so, one of the things, kind of going off of what you said, one of the things that I talk about a lot is every word is an opportunity to bring someone closer or send them farther away. So,
Distracted or not, yeah,
yeah,
that's the same. I like that.
yeah. And so we look at some of the traditional things that we have to do in business reporting. So like, where's the company based? What do they do? How many square feet and that sort of thing. All of those things are important, but it works better if you can sprinkle
Craft it.
them in as
Right.
opposed to, because if you've got
Dragnet. Here's the facts, ma'am.
15 words explaining just basics at the beginning, someone's already thinking about the email they have to send, or
Right.
the stop they may have to make at the store after work or something, and you lost them.
Right.
And so you got to get them in and pay attention to keeping them in as long as you can.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, a lot of the writing that's for the web, and I'm not talking about newspapers, really real media sources, but, you'll see these stories that will say, like, I'm a big sports geek, right? So I'll
Me
use
too.
the sports.
Let's just talk about that the rest of the way. Then I don't care. We'll have a Gonzaga basketball prediction anyway
And so,
before the end of this
so you'll
podcast.
see something that says, Seahawks release all-star, all-pro, defensive player, right?
Right.
And it's like, okay, so I have to I have to go way farther into it to find out who they're even talking about
To make you read it.
And it's all about them trying to get the click and get someone on the page. It's cheap. It's not building a relationship,
Right.
So
right,
we
right,
want to
right.
build a relationship.
Right.
And so we try to avoid doing those kinds of things.
Do you worry about the free press and the attack on it and just the watering down of it, or the I don't know how to say this, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Just the amount of respect that we as a country have had for the free press. It's not what it was.
Sure.
Do you worry about that?
Yeah, I worry about it. Yeah.
What worries you?
Well, I worry about, it's not the attack that I worry about as much as the press not having a presence in places where it was before. So when I first started the Coeur d'Alene Press, I was covering the city council, right? And so I'd go to every city council meeting and some committee meetings, right? And that was part of my job.
There's your beat.
Yeah. Now, maybe the press has people going to those meetings. Maybe the spokesman has people going or watching them online, but not every community has that kind of presence anymore.
Watchful eye.
Yeah, and and what that did was, a lot of times it kept people from saying stupid stuff, because they knew it would be in the paper and it mattered at that time,
Right.
And so now, and then where the attacks come in is people will say stupid stuff, someone will report it, and then it'll be the reporter who did the wrong thing. And so that's where you worry about, are those the kind of conversations we should be having in our country?
How much has Twitter changed what you guys do?
What we do, my knee jerk is it hasn't
I would
much.
I would agree with that.
Yeah,
On a local level,
sure.
to a local community,
Right.
I think it's losing some steam anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But everybody has a voice now.
everybody has a voice now. Yeah.
And that's not a bad thing, but for me personally, it just means that I'm going to sources I know are safe to get information that I am confident is legitimate. Yeah.
Right, because you do worry about whether or not there's access. You
Sure.
know, I'm on the national board of a group that's concerned about digital advertising being attacked,
Sure.
called Internet for Growth, and its really main purpose is that if legislation get changed, if too many big things get clamped down on the ability for digital advertising to happen, that it will really harm small business.
Mm-hmm.
Because we have a lot of clients that we've helped the last, I would say, 5 to 10 years, who never used to be able to have a voice and a platform
Sure.
and a place to show who their brand was or tell their story.
Sure.
And because it's much more effective, it's much more targeted, it's much less expensive.
Right.
They can do that,
Sure.
And if that kind of thing goes away, then they lose that opportunity to do that. So I think of the same things around just sort of this balance of privacy and speech and free
Right.
speech. Is
Sure.
you think that line has changed? Where what have you
Not
noticed
yet.
about it?
I mean, I mean, I'm not an expert on that by any stretch of the imagination. But I think there's always been a push and pull there, and but I don't know that there's been a pronounced shift in where that line is. I do think that the rules of engagement have changed to a certain point where in the past people pretty much had to work with the news media. These days you have elected officials who will refuse to comment on something directly related to their job, you know.
And you never used. They always had to comment.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Why
you
is that? You think?
I think it has something, I don't know for sure, but I think it has something to do with them having their own voice with their constituents. And so,
They're just talking to them,
yeah.
and that's enough to get them
Or,
elected, so they
you
don't
know,
care.
not to get, not to get too far out there, but our politics have become sophisticated enough to where a certain party can say, we are going to win in this area because there's a certain letter behind a certain person's name, you
Right.
know. So it's less about the quality of the candidate in some cases and more about, and so if you've got a candidate who's just hiding behind their party, you know, they can do that and get away with it and still get reelected.
And it's happened a
Yeah,
lot,
on
and
both
that
sides
is
of the aisle, by the way.
right.
Yeah,
And I've been a, as I look back, I've equated this before, but we are in a sort of a, in some ways, a natural cycle of technology emerging.
sure.
When television showed up, it was this thing that nobody knew what to do with. There weren't really any rules, and Joe McCarthy goes, "Well, wait a minute, I can just make up a bunch of stuff, and nobody's gonna tell me I can't. There's no rules about it." And he got away with murder
Yeah,
for a
sure.
while, and then it was like, "Whoa!" Edward Murrow kind of went, "Okay, I want to call you out on this.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
yeah,
gonna let a bully win, right?" And it did change. There were rules about that.
sure,
The FCC has things you can and can't say, but it was so new that we didn't really know, right?
sure.
Here comes social media. Not that long. I mean, we're talking the last 10 years of
Yeah,
this, right?
yeah, 15
FCC
or
rules
so.
probably
Yeah,
didn't kick in for a good 5 to 10 years after the thing was invented, and came out, right? We're at that same sort of place now that
sure.
affect, but it is on steroids. It's not one medium where there are four networks.
Sure.
There's thousands of places where you get your information, or I do,
Well, and the scary thing,
across every medium.
yeah. Well, and the scary thing that we have to kind of reconcile
News and
as a,
entertainment and everything.
right. Yeah. The scary thing that we have to reconcile as a society is, and I'm not suggesting going backwards, but back in the day when I had my paper route, everybody's reading the same thing.
That's right.
Today, when you open your Instagram, your Facebook, your Twitter, you are seeing something vastly different in all likelihood than what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
your perception of the
You
world,
and I maybe not,
yeah,
age and things, but possibly.
but even if we have like interests, we're still
It's going to be
seeing
different.
something
We're
different,
not seeing the same. You and I are not
Yeah.
seeing the same thing as close as we are to demographic age and all
And
that.
so before we were all having a conversation based off of the same information, and now we're having conversations based off of vastly different, and some of us are better at vetting information than others,
Right,
and
right. There's no Walter Cronkite anymore,
yeah,
who could kind of stand there and go, this is,
yeah,
this is how it
yeah.
is.
And so I think it's a double-edged sword because I think it's good that there's more voices. I think it's good that everybody has a microphone, and that there's the barrier of entry is lower, but it does come with some challenges that we're experiencing as a society.
What do you read?
So I read the Times, New York
Me
Times,
too.
yeah,
I
and
subscribe them all the time, and I just think they're just really good.
yeah, I pay for it. So
Me
there's
too.
and the Post,
Washington
and
Post.
yeah, the Washington Post, and you know, there are some people who will say that they're to the left or there's a bias and that sort
That
of
liberal
thing.
New York Times.
Well, and sometimes there is, but I
Oh, for
can,
sure.
as a reader,
You can tell.
I can vet that myself and make a decision on
Correct.
what I'm going to believe. I'm not,
It's still the
I'm not
best
being
writer.
spoon
It's
fed.
still the best writers in the world.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, it is.
right? It
It
is.
is.
It
Yeah,
is. I mean, that matters.
yeah,
And they do the best research.
yeah,
And stuff doesn't come out of there unless it's really good.
yeah. And if you look, there's multiple voices, multiple positions being,
Oh yeah.
it's not
I don't find it
a chorus.
a leaning thing. Where
Yeah,
I feel like it's pretty middle,
yeah,
and does a good job. I mean, I'm sure there are people who are even watching this right now thinking I'm absolutely crazy for saying
sure,
that.
sure,
But I wonder if they've read it.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. And I think
that's
so,
the other
like,
thing. Stuff
yeah,
can get labeled all that. I'm like, if you read this thing,
yeah.
it is. It's got a lot of opinions.
And so you mentioned podcasts earlier, so the Daily from the
Yeah,
New
yeah,
York Times,
really
yeah,
good,
it's great.
phenomenal.
But yeah, sometimes I'm listening to it and going, boy, they really have
It's too far.
they have an opinion on this
A bias.
doesn't match mine.
And it isn't always left and right.
Right.
It's often big city versus the flyover states,
Well,
of
it
which
is.
we are. Right. So and that can be construed. That can get construed as left.
Yeah,
Not so at all. I mean, the conservative there's the conservatives in New York and D.C. think of the flyover states every bit as much as the liberals
right,
do.
right.
But it is this sort of, I don't know, looking down the nose at the
Sure.
people that don't really matter in the world. And I've always, I've said this a lot, but I think we here have such a cool understanding of what America likes
Sure.
in a way that no one in DC or LA or New York does,
Yeah.
because they're just not they're not in the same world that the rest of us are.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well,
because
and
we're surrounded in a really cool way by both, right?
by everything.
By everything
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
big and small, and
Right.
the county and the city, very different.
That's one of the reasons I fell in love with the Spokane area, honestly, is because, and I did when I moved here. When I moved here in the 90s, and I don't know if this was your experience or not, but it's felt like when I'd meet people who were from here, they felt like they had to explain why they were still here.
Oh, I
You know?
did. Or at least I got asked about it.
And so,
Did you ever leave?
and I was like, I don't get it. I think this place is great.
I've always thought it was
know?
great.
And so
I know.
and then you get,
But-
and then some of the younger generation, like my daughter goes to school in the Midwest, but if you ask her about Spokane, she's all about it,
Oh,
And
yeah.
So
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like she was dying to get out of here. She just had to go somewhere else to do exactly what she wanted to do.
Right. And
so-
you can just see it. They're all
Yeah.
moving here and or not leaving or coming here.
Sure.
I mean, Zach's from Chicago.
Yeah.
I mean, he chose to come here.
Yeah.
And that was never the case when I was a kid. I mean, it was never. It was always
Sure.
the brain drain. We're now experiencing the reverse brain drain.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, with the homelessness stuff that I've worked on, and, Gavin Cooley says this really well, we're sort of a victim of our own success because this place is kind of booming. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody wants to be here. And because of that, now, we weren't ready. There's not enough housing. There's not enough,
Sure.
ready to handle this. So how much of that challenge right there, the homelessness and housing and, just infrastructure challenge of sort of being a little boom town here in the last few years, are you aware of and drives what you're doing and your
Yeah.
readers care about?
Well, I think I think one of my biases is affordability. So when we talk about quality of life, so much of what made this a great place to raise a family is affordability.
Absolutely.
And so that is not the case anymore unless you're moving from another market and have equity in a home that you sold that in that market.
Right.
A kid getting an average wage job now in Spokane, can he or she afford a home? Not usually.
Or is there one even available?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, we know that. The work that we did, a good 30% at least of the people that lived at Camp Hope had full-time jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, in a homeless encampment,
Hmm.
we're working.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a challenge, right?
That's a hard conversation to have.
It's very hard.
And so that's, I guess when I'm looking at it, that's the lens through which I look at it as is we've talked about quality of life for Spokane. It's what we've hung our hat on for so long. And we still have so many of the elements of it, but the affordability element is not what it once was.
Right, and the availability to actually get a place
Yeah.
to live.
Now that's settling down a little bit. You're seeing those inventories come back
They're
a
not as
little bit.
drastic as they were.
But the apartment vacancy rate's still under 1%, according to the numbers that I believe it was Grant Forsyth
Yep.
gave at the
The
economic
economic
forecast
forecast.
yesterday.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what did you take away from that? Every year, right? Journal Business or GSI.
Yeah.
You guys probably do.
Yeah.
Or some sort of sponsor of does an economic
Yeah, we're
forecast
the
with
event
Grant.
sponsor, yeah.
Yeah, and I always find it really, really pretty interesting just to see the trends and where it's going. What did you take away from the
don't know,
latest?
it's kind of
What's
interesting.
the state of this business town here?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because it felt like last year everybody was talking about recession, and when I looked at it, I was like, boy, I just don't see it. And
Didn't feel like it.
and now it feels like we're starting to see some signs. The housing market has settled. It's not, tanking or anything like that, but it's settled. You are seeing these things about manufacturing slowing down in some areas and that sort of thing. And I always keep it in mind that it's we're coming out of this completely unprecedented time where there was, I would say, unprecedented government shutdowns, right?
A lot more than more than ever.
Yeah, and followed by unprecedented amounts of stimulus money, right?
Right.
And so we had, and Steve Scranton from Washington Trust Bank, the economist, in the past he's referred to that as kind of the sugar high that we had, and I think we're still coming down off that sugar high. And so it's interesting that last year they said we're headed into a recession, and then when I looked around, I didn't really, and now I'm starting to feel like I see some signs of some softening, and they're saying, yeah, there might not be a recession. So it's just this unprecedented time after the pandemic that I think we're still working out from, and I think we will be for a couple of years.
Yeah. How much do you feel like an amateur economist in this job?
Yeah, I can get
you're
out over my skis pretty quickly.
Well, you're
but
dealing with it a lot, though, right?
yeah,
It's something you got to know
yeah,
at
but
some level,
yeah, yeah,
or trend watching or whatever, right?
yeah, but it's yeah.
That's dangerous territory too.
There's still a thick dark line between me and a Grant Forsyth. That's
Oh
for
yeah.
sure.
Well, anybody in Grand Forsyth probably. Okay, that's fair enough. That's
Yeah,
fair enough.
yeah.
So what are you hearing from businesses? That's the other thing you get in this gig.
Yeah.
You get to talk to people like
Some
me
sentiment,
all
yeah.
the time about
Yeah.
what's going on. You always ask me that. You probably ask that to everybody you talk to.
Sure.
Right? How's it going?
Yeah.
What's it look like for you?
Yeah.
Right? What are you hearing? What's the newsman with his ear to the ground hearing?
A lot of what I'm hearing is consensus about from what we heard in the economic forecast yesterday, where people are talking more about a soft landing and not really seeing if there is a recession, one with any depth to it. So
That's good.
it is good. It is good. And so I just think there's going to be some elements, like I said, that we're still working through from the pandemic and the reaction to it, and that's not a political statement, none of us knew what was happening. We all thought we could get sick and die by going to the grocery store,
And some
people did.
millions, lots of people did.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it happened.
Yeah.
I know 5.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like it didn't happen.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
But the farther we get away from it, the
The
I
less
think it's
scary
easier.
it is.
Yeah.
It totally changed in terms of hysteria or whatever. It's kind
sure.
of got away from that.
I mean, gosh, imagine telling someone years ago that we went to the arena to get our vaccination shots,
So strange, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
that surreal?
yeah,
It's already surreal.
It is.
I know.
it
My
is.
daughter's a senior at UW, and she missed college.
Sure.
She missed it. 1 quarter, go home. for a year and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, by then there is no connection
Right.
to class. I mean, that's what college is. It's
Sure.
friends and network and
Yeah.
camaraderie and learning from each other and being stupid and being, and
Yeah,
learning to be smart
absolutely.
together. And that whole generation, I'm really interested to see the impact of that. And
Yeah.
yet, she seems to be great, but she's talked about it. She's like, I have a level of anxiety that this is a girl that never had it. I mean,
Sure.
afraid to talk to nobody, and getting better. It's coming back now, kind
Yeah.
of getting better. But that kind of stuff is, I just wonder about the long term effects of something like that.
Sure.
Right? We won't know probably for a while, but it's real.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah,
It's real.
yeah.
But when you ask about the Spokane economy, I think there's some things that are going on right now that maybe not everybody, and myself included, understand how big they could be. Like the tech hub designation for Gonzaga and its partners at the old Triumph plant on the West Plains. That if they make the cut on that, that's $50 to $75 million in federal funding to launch something there that could be hundreds of jobs and a real difference maker for the area.
So can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so my understanding is that the federal government.
Out of this new stuff, that the tech kind of some of that stimulus money and that infrastructure kind of investment, right? One of the Biden initiatives, anyway, right? That came out of
Yeah, so basically the idea
investment
is we need to invest in technology and manufacturing in the United States.
That's right.
And so what the government's going to do, what the federal government's going to do, is designate 5 to 10 of these tech hubs throughout the country. There were something like 390 that applied nationwide, and they cut it down to 31. The proposal for the advanced aerospace manufacturing facility on the West Plains is one of those 31.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, it
That's
is.
pretty incredible,
It
anyway.
is.
And it makes a lot of sense just geographically, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we are kind of the center of a huge geographic area, right? From here to Minneapolis, kind of.
Yeah, and if you look at, well, first of all, you have this massive facility there that is literally built for it.
Right.
It was a
right,
Boeing
right.
facility
Right. Triumph, yeah.
And so
Sitting there,
yeah.
it's either going to be that or weed. Massive amount of weed.
Yeah, that would be a lot of weed. Yeah.
We can do it. We can do it, America.
And so
You can do it, Spokane.
But I mean, if you look at the potential there, if we're really one of those 5 to 10,
know.
and the niche is a good one. And if you look at the partners, there's like 50
In aerospace.
partners on that.
Something that this town's been really working on for a long time,
Yeah.
really, in any way.
It makes sense.
And Boeing and Seattle on the pipeline. I mean,
Yeah.
it does make sense.
And Lockheed Martin and Boeing are on the list of partners on that. And so,
What do you think it would do? Have you thought through it a little bit?
well, so Gonzaga loves it for the educational aspect, and it opens up a new avenue for them. And Thane McCullough was on Elevating a couple months ago,
Right.
And he said basically, we're going to push for this regardless of whether we get the federal funds. It's just the federal funds would make it happen all at once.
Would be
And so-
immediate.
and by the way, there's another proposal that was Washington State University and a handful of others for a tech hub that would be focused on the sterile injectables, like what they do at Hollister Steer
Right.
and Selkirk Pharma.
Yep.
And that's not dead because they didn't get the tech hub. It just
It might take a little more time.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all of that kind of, I, as somebody that's kind of helped tell the GSI story a little bit over the last 10 years,
Oh,
right?
sure.
And being a little, hearing some of this, not the level that you studied or see it every day, but those kinds of thoughtful investments a decade ago are starting to kind of show their hand, right?
Right.
The university district and what it is doing now, the medical schools.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And it really makes a lot of sense when you look at just, you zoom up above and take a drone shot of this area, the room that's available for something like that. right? That used to be the yard
Sure,
when we
sure.
were a kid, when I was a kid,
Yeah.
and it was a dump. And Tom Foley, honestly, seeing the foresight of that university district
Hmm.
30 years ago,
Yeah.
and making the early investments to do that, are now this position to be kind of an innovative hub for this country and this world,
Hmm.
and the jobs that come with that, and the clean jobs that come with that
Sure.
really when you talk about median income in this town, are my kids going to have a job? Can they afford it? All of that stuff, all of that helps it, right? Those
Sure.
boats all rise, and they give you
Yeah.
reason to build more and give you reason to have more people here. Am I
Yeah.
saying this right?
I think so. And, so it's amazing to think that, so I don't know how much time you've spent looking at the momentum effort of the late 80s, early
Mm-hmm.
90s, but the university
My dad
district,
was part of that way back in, yeah.
yeah, it basically uh, was born from that
Yeah, momentum,
effort
right.
to move Spokane away from a natural resources based economy to something that was
Mining and agriculture,
more diverse, yeah,
right.
and timber.
And
So
timber,
those
yep.
and for decades, if one of them was down, the other two would be strong. And then in the 80s, all of them started facing their own challenges.
Yeah.
And of course they all still play a significant role in the
But
in
they're
the
not having
Spokane
to carry
economy.
the weight.
Yeah, but now we have the higher education, the health sciences
The
is a huge
medical, just a
driver.
medical, providing
Yeah,
of medical care here
and
as a
something
hub.
that I don't know that everybody is. I mean, the average Joe is completely aware of is how strong our financial sector is here. So with the banks that are based here, the credit unions that have
Yeah,
grown over the
yeah,
last 20
yeah,
years,
yeah.
I mean, they're the corporate citizens now, by
Right.
and
Yeah, I
large.
mean they spawn. Yeah, I mean I helped basically tell the SCCU story for 20 years,
Sure.
and they're the major sponsor of your webcast, right?
Yeah,
And I've
some of
grown
them, yeah,
into a
yeah,
really great corporate citizen and do
sure.
so much good.
And that
I mean,
corporate
they do so
citizenship,
much stuff.
yeah, it matters.
Oh,
It matters.
yeah, and and conversely, when you lose like a Sterling
Sure.
bank here, there's a hole because they were incredibly generous kind of
Yeah.
donors and helpers to all kinds of things here. When that goes away, it's hard to replace.
Well, it's true. And so, and I don't remember the dates off the top of my head, but it's something like, 2011 or so, there were
Hmm.
15 publicly traded companies here. Now there are six, and
Right.
so some of that's through acquisitions, consolidation, some of it's just businesses going out of business. And then a couple of cases where they moved their
They move
headquarters,
headquarters.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
sort
Yeah.
of thing. But, that means that the same nonprofits, business organization efforts, they're going to the same well over and
Oh, it's
over
it's
again.
the usual suspects
Yeah.
for everything. Yeah, and that's a big burden on those
And it would be
organizations.
great to see, that pool grow again at some point.
So one of my questions is, if you could wave your magic wand for the economy and business here, what would it be? And I would guess adding a few corporate headquarters wouldn't hurt, or
Yeah,
growing them out of here,
sure, sure.
homegrown stuff.
And
What Tom Simpson's doing, and
yeah,
all and all the angel groups and everything that's happening there in terms of trying to grow our own.
yeah, yeah, it's a really important piece. Kind of uh, and Tom would be able to speak to this much more eloquently than me, and he might even disagree. But it appears as though that the exit for startups is accelerating. In other words, if it was 5 to 7 years before investors expected an exit, it's more like 3 to 5 now, I would guess. I'm making those numbers up, which I
What
shouldn't do,
impatience?
but it makes the opportunities for that kind of homegrown growth
Harder.
harder, and it would be it would I think it would take a conscious effort for a startup to grow to be something that was a corporate citizen like that. Yeah.
So I mean, I know you're a practical news guy,
Sure.
but do you ever dream about what this place could be and what you wish would happen? And do you ever go, "Oh, why doesn't this go?" What if so, what is that? What would you do if you got to be, in charge of all of this and could magically have things happen in the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think it would be a greater corporate presence. I mean, our small business community, I would say it's thriving.
And I think it's probably some of the best in the world,
Yeah,
honestly,
yeah.
in this country anyway.
But if we
The
could get
diversity
some
of
more of
it, and
that backbone of large companies, with, the higher salaries, all of that matters, and so if we could get something like that, I think it would be helpful. And if we could grow our own, it would be even better. I mean, that's what Seattle did. I mean,
just
Amazon was
name
grown
them.
there.
Go down the
Starbucks,
list.
yeah.
Starbucks,
I mean, technically
Amazon,
Microsoft
Microsoft.
moved, but I
Well,
mean,
there's still a
pretty early.
huge presence there. I mean, they still have enough of a presence there. Come on.
No, I mean
Oh,
they
corporate.
moved when they were young.
When they were
They
young.
moved, but they were really young when they moved. So it basically grew there. So,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah. No, I know. We could stand to
yeah,
stand to have some of those here, right?
yeah,
So with that, there are likely, with all the cool stuff going on here, people are like, why did housing hit so low? I was like, well, all the cool people that lived in Seattle and Portland can't afford to live there, so they moved here, which is great for our creative sort of everything,
uh-huh.
right? But it also is one of those things when a business looks to relocate or looks to start, or is this going to be the place where I grow my business from? Invariably, it is going to be, is there a place for people to live? And how bad is and how much do you hear from the business community about the homeless issue and the lack of housing, or does that get discussed much in your mind? I mean,
Yeah.
how
I
is
mean,
it
I think it's
hurting us?
forefront in the minds of most business owners, especially those with a presence in the core.
Downtown, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, we hear it a lot. We hear it a lot. And so, it's a difficult situation that we're in. It's not unique to us,
No, and I
but
think a lot of people here don't realize that.
yeah, I mentioned
Most cities are
yeah,
dealing with this midsize. I mean, we're in the top 6, I think, per capita here.
yeah. Doesn't mean we don't need to do something about
Right.
it, but it is something. I mean, I saw it,
Systemic around the country.
yeah, going to visit my daughter in the Midwest. I saw it there as well, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so
San
it's
Francisco's scary
yeah,
right now.
yeah, yeah,
Really.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you hope that the regional effort gets some legs, and that we can start looking at it like that. But you know, we're talking about a vulnerable population, and so it's a really difficult conversation to have. And so, how do we help people while keeping our city?
How do you land the plane while you're building it? A
Yeah,
little bit.
a little bit. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for
Because
sure.
I think one of the things, what I learned out of the 2 years of working on the housing and help issue really was, and every time that there becomes a roadblock, someone's holding that up because it takes everybody. That's
Sure.
the heart, The theme to our show, the series really was there's not a resource problem, or a money problem, really. There's an agreement problem.
Yeah.
And that's just going to be, there's no easy way to do that. You got to slog through it
Yeah.
because nonprofit and service providers are super affected by this, and they're really needed
Sure.
to make this work.
Yeah.
So is business, and they've got to think about this differently than they ever probably have.
Yeah.
And so do every level of government, right? And I think that if you can get that to happen, and this is a town that does that.
Right.
It's done it historically.
Sure.
If it can happen anywhere, people here kind of, it's a small enough town and a big enough town
Sure.
where I think people have the ability to kind of go, okay, what do we really got to do? Every time there's a roadblock though that stops that or slows it down, I always just go back to the main point of our entire series, which was we're spending, by doing nothing, five times more than we would be if we got people housed with services in the right way.
Yeah.
We're just throwing money away
Sure.
every day.
Right.
And I don't care who you are, if you're Republican or Democrat, if you're a nonprofit or you're the government or you're a business, everybody, that is the common denominator. Money is the common denominator of all of this. And
Sure.
we're all collectively losing
Yeah.
from not doing it.
Yeah.
So that's my hope. My hope is that there's enough that continues to always be the message.
Right.
Because no matter what you do, it's not working. And,
Yeah.
and doing something collectively, even though it's hard and it might take a while, is so going to be worth it.
Sure.
I don't think there's any other way to do it. I mean, maybe you've got another view of that, or you hear different stuff.
I don't have another view of that, but
I think that is, anytime I say it to anybody, no matter who they are, they have to take pause and go, oh yeah, because we're just hemorrhaging it.
yeah. Yeah.
It's not efficient. When you have a homeless person where, all the people that show up to have to serve, to take care of that, the cost of that just exponentially on, first responders, on emergency rooms, I mean, it's just a massive thing. And I do think though, when that can get solved and when you can get, housing, I mean, I'm as much as I've worked on that project around the homelessness issue, I've just finished working on a project right now, or in the middle of, and we're launching a campaign around how important, with really most of it paid for by the Spokane Realtors and the national Realtors and the state level, we are underhoused 25,000 homes in this community. I mean, it's 25,000 households that it is inherently leading to this. Yeah. So maybe it won't be the case that a prospective business that might want to move here or grow here and stay here thinks about this all the time, but that's an alarm bell.
Sure.
And I don't know how much of that pops up in your world, but I would think if that could get fixed, and I think it is.
Yeah.
Maybe not fast enough. Maybe not in the core. Maybe not in the city.
Sure.
The way it could be. I mean, the stats we've heard is that of all the building that's been going on since 2019, 92%, it's only 7% of it's happening in the city.
Wow.
And Jim Frank was a part of that.
Sure.
So was Gavin Cooley, both of them in that series that we just put out. And that was Jim's kind of take on this was, you're now moving the base of this region away from the city.
Right.
And to Liberty Lake and to Post Falls.
Airway Heights. I mean, everywhere.
Airway Heights. Yeah. You agree with that?
Yeah. I mean,
you see it.
I mean, that's the quote that we had from Jim in the paper not too long ago. Was he said there's almost more homes being built in Airway Heights than there are in Spokane.
Go see it. We've droned it in Rath, just over the state line.
Sure.
And have a shot of what used to be farmland is a massive amount of homes.
Yeah.
And good. We all need them.
Right.
But it is not in Spokane.
Right.
It's not in the county or the city.
Yeah. And so one thing that Steve Scranton mentioned, I have the economic forecast fresh in my mind. So,
that's good.
But one of the things that he mentioned was the regulatory cost for building a home in Washington State, and that you're basically you're starting at 150,000 before you even come out of the ground because of the regulatory costs. So
and there are hoops in the city that are very different than the rest of the state.
Sure.
Good or bad, I don't know,
right.
but it just makes it more difficult, I guess.
Right.
Yeah, that's a challenge.
Yeah.
Inherently to all this stuff. So, all right. Well, I just wonder if what you're hearing.
Yeah, it's definitely forefront on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah.
For sure.
So, how do you feel about the journal going forward? What are you excited about? What's on the horizon, and how long do you think this can stay heavy? You know what I mean? On the print side, nothing.
I would say for the foreseeable future.
I think so too.
I mean, I think it's all about content, right? I mean, it's all about the quality of the content, and if we can tell people what's going on in their community, and do so in an engaging manner, then I think we'll have a place for a long time.
Well, I think so too. I mean, that's kind of my hope, is that this will, that this kind of thing can stay.
Sure.
But and that I think it's a huge part of this community being. This is one of those things when you talk about it's going to take everybody.
Sure.
It would be way harder without the journal business.
Yeah.
It would be way harder without the Inlander. It would be way harder without a lot of the things that we have. And I feel like between the spokesman and, I mean, that's a pretty healthy mix right now, both digitally and print.
I mean, it's amazing that every, the three newspapers in our community are locally owned. I mean, that's astounding.
That is astounding.
I mean,
that has got to be rare.
I mean, there's so many newspapers that are owned by private equity firms or large corporations now. And granted, Cole's Company is a large, corporation.
But they're here.
But they're here.
Right.
Yeah. And roots down. And to have the McGregors doing what they're doing, we're a fortunate community, if you ask me.
Who wins a wrestling match, arm wrestling match between you and Ted McGregor? Let's be honest.
Oh, me.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
I'm not sure about Jer. I don't know.
No, yeah, Jer's a little, he's kind of scrawny strong. That guy. Lanky strong.
I just realized I don't know Ted well enough to make that joke. So sorry, Ted.
Too late.
Yeah,
we've got our
it's
promo. Well, cheers, man. Thanks for being here and taking
thanks.
time and
appreciate
talking
your
about
time.
your wisdom and, and pretending to drink whiskey, making me drink it all. Anyway, well, thanks, man. Hopefully we'll do this again.
I'd love to.
All right. MIP Podcast was filmed at the studio of Corner Booth Media. Please sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on social media. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Music, and anywhere podcasts can be found. We'd love it if you'd rate, review, and subscribe to help our podcast grow. Be good to yourself and stay interesting.